If you're interested in JFK research, then there's a network just for you. It's called the Firehorse Network. So just say into your phone, Firehorse Network, and it's JFK 24/7. So we're going to be running JFK shows from number 1 all the way to number 151. It's the new JFK show streaming all the time on firehorsenetwork.com.
All right, welcome to the new JFK show number 160. We've got a two-part episode tonight, and we really have a full house. We've got Dr. Jim Fetzer, Larry Rivera, Don Fox, Mr. Charles Lincoln, and Dr. Ralph Cinque. So you can definitely expect many comments when Dr. Cinque is on the show. All right, so tonight we're going to lead off with Mr. Charles Lincoln, and welcome to the show. And from what I understand, that you knew or were classmates with Officer J.D. Tippet. So go ahead from there.
No, his son, Gary. His son.
Your son. Okay.
His son.
All right, that your son was...
Yes, I wasn't born in 1920.
All right. Yeah, so go ahead and tell us your story, sir.
Well, it's just a weird little elementary school anecdote, really. One of the strangest. I went to a very small school in the neighborhood of Dallas called Highland Park. I don't know if you've heard of Highland Park or not. It's kind of like a little miniature Texas version of Beverly Hills. My grandparents lived there. It was a very, very sort of sometimes
exclusive. Exclusive.
Yeah, exclusive neighborhood. It was absolutely, back in those days, you know, very, 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 very much all white. Anyhow, the elementary school had like 300 students in it for 5 grades. So we're talking about a very, very, very small school for a big city. And anyhow, throughout my years, 1 through 5, I was classmates with the same people. And one of the people in my particular group was a kid known as J.D. Tippet Jr., except that wasn't his real name. His real name was Charles Tippet, but everybody called him after his father's name. And we all knew that his father was dead, but I didn't know the story, and I'm not sure anybody knew the story among my classmates at that time, that his father had been assassinated the same day as JFK, and was the reason Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested. But J.D. Tippet Jr., aka Charles Tippet, he was it's hard to explain. He was I guess you'd call him a serious.
It was used as a fabricated pretext to arrest Lee Oswald. They had their man before the assassination even took place.
Well, I hope they didn't kill Tippet just to create a pretext.
Well,
I'm afraid
Oswald did not shoot Tippet. He was already in the Texas Theater getting popcorn when Tippet was shot.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, I certainly didn't know any of that, one way or the other, and all I knew is that this very sadly sort of maladjusted boy was in my class, and he looked different from everybody else, and he acted different from everybody else, and he was very noticeable, and up to a point, that's really all I know for sure, except that he was any other kid who misbehaved as much as he did probably would have been expelled, because it was a very strict school.
Can I ask Charles something real quick? Was he classmates with him at the time that of the JFK assassination?
No. This was 3 years afterwards. I started first grade in '66.
Okay.
So I was born 1960, so we're talking 66 through 71.
So presumably Charles was also born in 1960 or thereabout.
Yes. No, he certainly was.
Right.
We were all one age group.
But he, like the rest of you, was living in a very high rent district, the Beverly Hills of Dallas, as you put it.
Yeah, and that was part of the interesting thing. He lived in a very fancy two-story house. I believe it was on Euclid, which is like 2 blocks away from me. I lived on Lindenwood. Euclid was two blocks over. You know, it was a very new 2-story house, and everybody commented on it. His father had been a policeman, and you know, not a lot of policemen. I mean, even Highland Park has its own police department, but none of the Highland Park policemen can afford to live there. And so the idea that it was a Dallas policeman living there, and everybody knew that the Dallas police weren't paid as much as the Highland Park police. It was a very interesting situation. His mother was, you know, extremely lavishly taken care of. She was, and everybody understood that. Everybody felt sorry for him. He had a brother and maybe a sister, I can't remember. But everybody understood that everybody felt sorry for them, and you know, they just had to be given special treatment. And everybody, that was all that was told to us as kids.
What you're saying, Charles, suggests that she was being pampered to keep her mouth shut.
Hey, Jim, is it a possibility that perhaps either the Merkins or the Hunts might have had something to do with all this newfound?
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely.
Nelson Bunker Hunt lived diagonal from my grandparents.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, and they didn't have any kids, and the school was called John S. Armstrong Elementary, J.S. Armstrong Elementary. And I don't think they had any kids in there. But
and they didn't move to change the school to John F. Kennedy.
They did not. It's still John S. Armstrong today. The major thing that's happened in the past 50 years is that integration, which was unthinkable at the time, has actually happened, and there are like, I think, 2 or 3 black families living in Highland Park now.
Charles, tell us, what was the attitude of the community when JFK was shot?
Okay, I was 3. I was 3, and I was not living in Dallas at the time. So
right. But as you came into the community, eventually you'd pick up here and there occasional references. Were you able to piece anything together? Was the community overjoyed that this liberal pinko president had been taken out and in Dallas, no less?
Okay, there was more of that than you might imagine. There were people who said that he was my grandparents who said he was very dangerous because he was Catholic. That he basically wanted, that they had originally assumed that when he became president, he was going to be the agent of the Pope, and that we'd basically be under papist authority. There were a lot of people who thought that, and then there were other people who saw him appointing Bobby as Attorney General and thought that was very suspicious, very abnormal, and said that he was trying to create a dynasty. And there was something called the Dallas Council, Dallas Women's
Council. The Dallas Citizens Council?
No, this is called the Dallas Council on World Affairs.
Okay.
And it was alleged that someone, and no one ever wanted to identify who, but somebody said that morning at a breakfast meeting of the Dallas Council of World Affairs. When will some hero stand up and rid this country of this menace?
Disgraceful.
Bad timing.
People are saying things like that about Trump today, Charles. You must be struck by the parallels and objecting that he has Jared Kushner, for example, his son-in-law, as a part of his administration.
Well, now, as a matter of fact, just yesterday I saw something I had never seen before. Are you all of you in New Orleans?
No. I'm in Wisconsin. Larry's in Puerto Rico. Don's in Austin, Texas.
CIA headquarters.
Gary's in New Orleans.
Right. Okay. Because he had offered to pick me up.
Yeah.
Anyhow, yesterday over on Jefferson Davis Boulevard, I've been involved in the monument issue here in New Orleans, the
Right.
Confederate issue, and we stopped over to see several of the statues over on Jefferson Davis Boulevard, and Jefferson Davis has been taken down, of course. But so we were looking at Albert Pike, and Albert Pike on right by his monument is some sort of, I guess it's an electrical box of some sort, and plastered on this metal box, is a picture of Trump basically bleeding from his head, and it says, "Make assassination great again." So it's kind of funny that you mentioned that.
We're trying to parallel to JFK, having actually the back of his head blown out. Yeah. Real nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Charles, have you gotten in touch with Nathan Lawrenson on Battle of New Orleans Radio?
No, I have not.
Because they were heavily into the monument fight. We all lost thanks to who is it?
Well, it is going to adversely impact New Orleans as a tourist attraction by taking down all these historic monuments. I mean, New Orleans just reeks of history, reeks of the South, reeks of the Confederacy. The idea of, dispatching all of those statues and mementos and forms of honor and respect for the past seems to me to be a terrible mistake that's going to really damage the tourist industry.
Yeah, it was Walter Isaacson I was thinking about. That basically got the whole monument thing going on.
It's not a mistake, Jim.
We just got our rear end handed to us, and the way the whole thing came about, how it was paid for, that Black Lives Mattered would show up, and they had a truck from Tulane that had Antifa, and it said, excuse my language, but it said, "Fuck Nazis." And then they jumped.
You gotta get the fuck Nazi scum.
Right, yeah. And so then they jumped out and sort of made it look like there was people fighting, and they sort of threw bottles, but no one was really getting hit. And so, but the main thing, the camera was there. And then once they caught that little bit of footage of people fighting and all, then it was over. Then they had their nuisance. Then came the barricades, and they took the barricade trucks that brought the barricades and barricaded the monument and gave everyone a free speech zone. So if you were for the statue, you could go over on this side of the street and exercise your free speech. Or if you were against the monument, you could go over here. So it's just a travesty what's been going on in New Orleans. And I just recognize Mr. Lincoln because I've heard his name many times, and people have asked me, have you gotten a hold of Mr. Lincoln yet? And you find out, you probably do know Nathan Lawrenson on Battle of New Orleans, but it's Walter Isaacson that really started, and the Aspen Institute is just behind the whole thing. And our mayor, Mitch Landrieu, has sold us out in every way.
Would you say that
I was going to say that.
Go ahead.
It so happens that before I became a JFK buff, I was a Civil War buff, and I think that the whole history of what happened has been totally skewed. Lincoln offered the South to passed a constitutional amendment that would forever ban the federal government from interfering with slavery in the South. That's how willing he was to continue slavery in this country. And then in addition, you know, he's credited with the Emancipation Proclamation, but the truth is it wasn't his idea. And it was issued not for the sake of actually trying to help any black people, but simply because they were afraid that the European countries like England and France might come in on the side of the South unless they did it. But it was a totally ineffective thing. He didn't free any slaves in the areas that he actually could have. He only declared that that the slaves within the states and in whatever parts of states that were in rebellion against the Union, that those slaves he was liberating, not any other slaves. So
you describe him as a reluctant emancipator.
I mean, really, he was an avowed racist, is what he was. I mean, he said many times whites and blacks.
Yeah, regardless of all that, you can be for or against it. It's the removal of history that is just a crime, and it happened just miles from here.
Don,
what about the haunting fact that Robert E. Lee freed all of his slaves before the war ever broke out, whereas Ulysses S. Grant didn't free a single of his 13 slaves until he was forced to by the 14th Amendment.
That's a great point, Ralph. Don, when you said it wasn't a mistake, you meant the whole thing, of course, was deliberately contrived. I meant in the long run, it's going to be harmful to New Orleans as a tourist attraction.
Well, yes, because, I mean, it's part of a program to eliminate white people from history. They're going to remove us.
But I mean, if you're gonna try to eliminate, what I wrote 2 years ago when this thing first came up was that if you want to eliminate all vestiges of
the Civil War,
white supremacy and slavery in New Orleans, it really just takes 2 atom bombs. Nuke the entire city, one for downtown and one for uptown. You really need 2 atom bombs to make sure you get rid of all the evidence of slavery and white supremacy, because this whole city is basically built as a monument to the civilization of the antebellum South, but also the Victorian South after the war. I mean, a lot of the beautiful architecture in New Orleans is in fact late 19th century, early 20th century, and those were the people who were putting up the monuments. And if you take out the monuments, what you're taking out is the textual, iconographic, historical center points of the civilization. And my background was as an archaeologist. I have a PhD in archaeology. And basically, we're now living in the ruins of New Orleans, and it's like a bunch of vandals came in, and it's very much like the sack of Rome as far as that goes.
That's exactly it. It's an invasion, and they're trying to destroy white civilization. That's what the game plan is.
And I mean, it's worth mentioning, I mean, this is way off the JFK topic, obviously, but there's a link, I think, that you can draw between the 3 events, between the Civil War, JFK, and what's going on right now. And that link is Marxism. I think very few, do any of you know who the London correspondent of the New York Tribune was in Abraham Lincoln's lifetime? Abraham Lincoln was a very close pen pal of the London correspondent of the New York Tribune.
Who was?
Karl Marx.
Oh my gosh.
That's fascinating. That's really fascinating.
Wow, that is fascinating.
Karl Marx and Abraham Lincoln had a very lively exchange of letters throughout the last 10 years of Lincoln's life, in which Marx was applauding him and supporting him and encouraging him, and basically saying things like what a genius move it was to recast the war as a war against slavery, and how that would be very, very effective.
Now, Charles, I take it you're not issuing a blanket condemnation of the principles of Marxism, at least as defined, for example, by the Communist Manifesto, which encourages universal education, the women's sovereignty, a whole host of issues that most liberals today, if they only understood the principles, would endorse. So that, you know, Marxism, of course, evolved through the communist revolution and so forth into a totalitarian state, but it's important to distinguish between the totalitarian dimensions and the actual original principles of the Communist Manifesto.
Well, I mean, I'm not a great fan of the Communist Manifesto, I have to say. I think it's an amazing document in history. It's one of these documents that turned out to be both prophecy and a guidebook at the same time. But again, I think there's some very interesting links between these 3 points in history.
Yeah, I want you to continue to pursue that. I'm just making the simple point that among the principles that are espoused in the Communist Manifesto are many that most Americans, if they were not told that they're also in the Communist Manifesto, would have no hesitation in endorsing, such as, you know, universal education and the sovereignty of women, women's suffrage.
How about the income tax and leveraged and centralized banking with highly leveraged credit as the means of abolition of private property? How do you think most Americans would feel about those things?
So we have that here in the United States today?
Yes. Already.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But I mean,
we live under, yeah.
Every plank on we already have.
But Charles, I was just trying to be a little more subtle, okay, than a blanket condemnation. I'm very interested in your idea that the Marxism is a theme of the Civil War and the assassination of JFK and the current controversy about our present president.
Well, I mean, and here's and also about New Orleans. But I mean, here's the other thing. I mean, anybody happen to know what one of the big controversies was about our currency under JFK? I mean, y'all are specialists, so you must, right?
You were talking about the silver certificates.
And silver certificates, and what was the very first monetary reform that LBJ ordered when he became president?
He reversed the publication of United States notes because JFK had instructed the Department of Treasury to print hundreds of millions of United States notes on the ground that it was absurd for the government to be paying interest to a consortium of private banks for printing the currency of the United States.
Right, and it is ridiculous.
But Johnson,
about that. I really think we're
also did. I mean, are any of y'all coin collectors?
Have been.
I am.
So what happened? What happened in the first few months of Johnson's administration to the U.S. coin system?
Oh, did he change the composition, the metallic composition of silver, for example?
Did he take silver out of the dime?
Terminated all silver coinage.
Wow.
1964, it ended.
That's very interesting. I don't think most of us were aware of that. That he pursued the war, that he kept the CIA, that he stopped prosecuting the mafia, that he reverted to the Fed. You know,
Jim, there are a lot of people who think that LBJ raided Fort Knox, the gold, to pay for the Vietnam War. There were reports of trucks driving in the middle of the night from Fort Knox, and you know, the gold in Fort Knox has not been audited since the Eisenhower administration. They refused to do it. And here it is, 2017. A lot of people very seriously believe that there's little or no gold in Fort Knox.
I'm among them, Ralph. I think you're absolutely right. I want Charles to pursue his theme about Marxism.
Okay.
Well, on that note of Fort Knox, I just want to ask you all: don't you think that 007 movie Goldfinger was really like a public confession of the disappearance of the gold from Fort Knox? It was a very subtle public message that that the world monetary system was about to change in a very radical way because of the disappearance of that gold.
I do remember a character in that film by the name of Pussy Galore.
Yeah.
I don't know if you read my letter about John Tippet, but he was the first person I ever heard that word from.
Pussy?
Yes,
pussy?
Yes, because I mean we still had prayer in school at that point in history. We still had nativity plays and Easter plays, and our teachers wouldn't, when we prepared Christmas cards, wouldn't let us write Xmas because you should never X out Christ. It's hard to believe that it's the same world we live in. But
Charles, thinking back upon it, do you think there was something then about the history of his family, in particular his father, that had this profound impact on Jefferson Davis Jr., actually named Charles, that turned him into this kind of juvenile delinquent? Or
oh, I mean, I think that obviously, he was fatherless. His mother went from basically being very poor to being very rich while he was growing up. I mean, I guess all of us in that neighborhood were what most people would consider spoiled, but he seemed spoiled even in that neighborhood.
Do you happen to know what became of him?
Huh?
Do you know what became of him as an adult?
I really don't. I mean, the last time I saw him was like when we were 15 or 16. I saw him at the pool, and he had grown to be very tall. But it's weird because I recognized him because he had a very dark complexion, and he was probably the darkest skinned kid in school. But everybody, this is Dallas in the 1960s. Everybody said, "Oh yeah, he looks kind of unusual, but he's white. Don't worry, he's white."
There's a student at JFK who believes that Tippet's body was actually transported to Bethesda, and they used him as a stand-in for JFK.
Yeah, Robert Morningstar.
Yeah. Did you ever hear from Charles any remarks about the assassination, the death of JFK, or the death of his father?
Absolutely not. No, I mean, it was, like I said, I was not even aware who J.D. Tippet was in history until I was in college. It was a big secret.
Did you ever meet his mother?
Oh yeah, I mean, she was she was at PTA meetings and came to school parties and everything, and I mean, she went to school plays.
If she ever remarried?
Huh?
Do you know if she ever remarried?
I don't believe she did. Okay. At least she didn't. If there was any man in his life, I never saw him.
What was your impression of her as a woman, as a mother, as a person?
I was in elementary school. I mean,
sure, I know.
All mothers looked extremely old to me, except for mine.
Right. Would you say there was a very deep-seated belief in the community that taking out JFK had been good for the country?
No, I didn't exactly say it was a deep-seated belief. I said a lot of people made nasty comments. Not everybody. Nobody said whether it was good or bad. Everybody had little stories about it that they would tell at parties, and just sort of recite things, and that everybody. I mean, everybody knows that Lyndon B. Johnson had a series of bodies all over Texas, and a few that weren't in Texas.
Right.
I mean, comments like that. No, I mean, it was all very, very quiet. And I mean,
was there anything like a consensus that Lyndon was behind it?
Again, more in, not explicit at that point in history. It was more like he was a bad guy. He did horrible things to Texas. He did horrible things to the country. And
no one stood to gain more personally from the death of JFK than Lyndon B. Johnson.
Well, no one was articulating that out loud at that point. I'll put it to you that way. And at least if they were, they didn't say it within the hearing of 6 to 11-year-old Charlie.
Don, you want to get into the action here? Don.
Yeah. Okay. So Charles, have you been active in the monument movement down in New Orleans?
Well, yes. As a matter of fact, I have. I was at the city council almost every meeting when they discussed it back in 2015, and then this year, after the decision came down, I filed a motion for leave to intervene in the lawsuit that was pending. It was just denied last week. My intervention was. I was trying to keep it alive, and I'd be happy to send you all a copy of the brief I submitted. It's kind of interesting, and I want to refile it. It'll have to be an independent lawsuit.
What was the thrust? What was the legal point you were making?
Several. One was that it was fundamentally an environmental issue, that they're trying to change the environment of New Orleans in a hateful way towards certain segments of the population. But whether it was hateful or not, it was a change in the historic and aesthetic environment, which is prohibited by Article 9, Section 1 of the Louisiana Constitution, which nobody else has brought up. Article 9, Section 1 says that the historic, scenic, and aesthetic environment of the state must be preserved and replenished where depleted. And so I say that this provision of the Louisiana Constitution, enacted in 1974 as the state mirror of the National Environmental Policy Act, is absolutely an absolute requirement that the monuments be restored. And I think that a more general issue is that we need to do an environmental impact statement under federal law concerning the amount of money that's being spent to destroy historic architecture and eliminate the heritage of New Orleans at an astoundingly rapid pace. I mean, the monuments, I have never had any interest in going to city council meetings for the monument issues, but I've gone to quite a few since then. And you know what they do all day at a city council meeting when they're not debating the monuments? They are basically voting to tear down historic buildings. They have to give them exemptions from the Historic Landmarks Commission, and there's never an application for an exemption from the historic regulations or forgiveness for violations that doesn't get passed. Just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 20 or 30 a day.
Charles, I want to thank you for coming on the show. You've made an excellent impression. I think we all have a very favorable opinion about everything you've said in your being here. Because we have a second guest, we must end now, but I want to thank you again. Really excellent. We're very glad to have had you here. Larry.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, good. I just wanted
pleasure, Charles.
I just wanted to mention real quickly that not only was Mrs. Tippet receiving all this wealth, so did Ruth Payne, who bought the entire block of houses. Marina Oswald, who married
Billy Lovelady,
and
Colorado, real estate and trucking.
Yeah, the Loveladies, of course. Yeah.
They made it out, sure.
This is New JFK show number 160. We're going to take a break right now, so we'll be right back.
In Dallas, Texas, 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade.
That's what we were told. Most Americans never believed Lee Oswald was the lone gunman, for excellent reasons. In fact, there were at least 6 shooters who fired from 8 to 10 shots or more who are identified here. We have, finally, the solution to the greatest murder mystery in history, laid out for the world to see, proof after proof after proof. Photos were faked, the body was changed, x-rays were altered, the home movies were fixed. 15 experts contribute to a 529-page book with 1,037 photos and diagrams in black and white and color.
Hi, this is Gary King. If you'd like JFK, who, how, and why, and would like to support the new JFK show, then go to patriotradiobooks.com. That's patriotradiobooks.com.
New JFK show number 160. We hope you do go to Patriot Radio Books. And don't forget about Firehorse Network. We're putting more and more shows. We're actually going to put some of those old shows from Revere Radio Network, those classic ones with people like Jim Mars and Dr. Fetzer and people like that. So don't forget, Firehorse Network, if you want to listen to JFK audio shows. All right, we're going to go ahead and flip over, and we're going to turn it over to Ralph Cinque.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, I've got a hodgepodge of images to show you tonight. I think it's going to be interesting. Some of this is very fresh, very new. Gary's going to start calling them up. As he's doing that, let me point out. Let's just start at the beginning here. I want to just spend 2 minutes on this. This is an image of somebody who looks strikingly like Dan Rather. It was taken in the garage after Oswald was shot, right at the end of the melee. Dan Rather denied being there. He claimed to be at the KRLD studio in Dallas, which was the CBS affiliate. And when asked why he was there, he said, "Well, I was co-anchoring there, but there's no record that he ever actually anchored on that day." That was 11/24. The following day, on the 25th, is when he gave his horrendous presentation in which he lied about what the Zapruder film showed. He said ridiculous things such as that, well, the reason why Kennedy seems to have been shot in the neck is because he turned completely around and was looking back at the depository.
Dan Rather said that, Ralph?
Something to that effect, right.
James Phelan who said that.
What?
James Phelan.
Arlen Specter made that claim too.
Well, there were many things that he said about JFK's actions and Jackie's, which are certainly not true in the Zapruder film, and he's famous for having given that speech. But that was the day after. But on the 24th, he claimed to remain in the studio, but was watching furtively from the studio, the action here.
Well, I gotta say, Ralph, when I look at this, it strikes me right off the bat as being Dan Rather.
All right, go to the next, because I brought a comparison. That's another view. Go to the next one now, and you'll see.
It did, didn't it?
Go to the next one. Okay, now here's the thing. You know, I've been doing this a long time now, and I do this point by point, just like they do with fingerprints. So I look at the ears; they look like a good match. I look at the very, very full cheeks that he had, where it almost seemed like a jowl, even though he was a young man at that time. I look at the very bushy eyebrows, and to me,
long nose.
The very, very striking resemblance there. Let me point something out, that if you saw this much likeness in somebody who, say, just was at the supermarket or was at the mall, I think it would still impress you. But we're talking about the cubbyhole of this garage. You have to realize how small it was. It was just this tiny little space.
Larry wanted to squeeze him
there. I mean, for him to have had a look-alike there, just to me seems very uncanny. All right,
Larry, squeeze a word in here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Larry.
No, I was looking at the ear, the right ear, but as the sideburn goes up, it seems like I don't know if it's either cut off there. We need a better image, but the ear is a dead ringer right there.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead to the next image. All right. So, so these are the four that I brought in.
I think you have a very intriguing conjecture that may well be true, Ralph.
It may be true. Like I said, I'm not betting my life on it. I mean,
right, but it's very interesting.
This was just a fluke. I would still want to know who this guy is, because he had to be a reporter. He had to be with some of the agency. He's obviously not a Secret Service agent.
Is this a camera that's partially obfuscating his face?
Yeah.
Yes, that is.
Okay.
That is a camera.
Go for it.
I go to the next.
Oh, next picture. Okay.
Okay. So there's another one that, to me, what I'm seeing here that impresses me is just the focus of the eye. That it just does seem like, from the other angle, that we're seeing the basic thing, the way the
And
eye.
Larry, what seems to be a longer sideburn on the left isn't real. I mean, it's clear his sideburn is as high as Dan Rather on the right. It's the same
This was
sideburn.
1963. Nobody had long sideburns like that. So no, that's just a little bit of distortion. So anyway, this I found intriguing, and so I brought it. But anyway,
good.
Let's go on to the next. Oh, okay, there's one more finally, and again, the ears I think match very well, and just again that whole jowly fullness of his cheek area just strikes me as being very much the same. So anyway, I think that's the last one. And I think from here we're going to talk. Go ahead.
Well, the remarks you're making about what he said about the film and so forth are so ridiculous that it seems to me he may have been an early recruit by the CIA under Operation Mockingbird.
Now, this I brought because in the last few weeks only, I have acquired the very firm conviction that Billy Lovelady had clinically protruding ears. In medicine, if your ear extends outward from your head 2 centimeters or more, it's considered clinical, you might say. And 2 centimeters is less than 1 inch because it takes 2.54 centimeters to make an inch. So less than an inch, 3/4 of an inch approximately. And that certainly seems to meet the criteria. That looks to me like a pretty severe degree of ear protrusion on him. I also want to point out that this is the only absolutely certain, reliable image of Billy Lovelady that we have. Every other image came from a source that you might say was suspect.
Well, what about the FBI photographs, Ralph?
Well, that's what I mean. The FBI photographs, they're really him. I don't doubt that that was him standing there.
I think
that the photos got a lot of editing done and a lot of,
I think they added hair, Ralph. I think they added hair.
Absolutely. Well, if you see, this picture was taken the winter of '64, so it was in months of the assassination. You can see that he was practically bald on top, except for a couple of strands that were remaining, but that was it. And if you look at the FBI photos, which I didn't bring, he has pretty much a full mat of hair there. So yes, they definitely doctored the hair. But there's something else I want you to do here. I want you to look at the ear on the doorway man, look at the ear on Oswald in the middle, and notice how perfectly matched they are. The shape, the pitch, the angle, and the way it tapers down to the lobule, which is the soft part at the bottom. Yeah. I mean, that is a perfect match of those ears. Whereas when you look at Lovelady, you see that he's got these way protruding ears. His ear was almost like a megaphone, the way it was shaped. It may have been good for his hearing, but it is a very, very odd thing, and that is a severe degree of protrusion of the ear. And listen, it explains something to me that I never thought of before, and that is this. From the time of the assassination, we never physically saw Lovelady again in his life. We saw images of him, like in 71, there was the image.
Robert Groden had a picture for us.
Yeah, but in other words, when I say we never saw him, it's like we never saw him in front of like a movie camera where we absolutely know this is real time, it's undoctored, and we're seeing him.
We never saw him in an unstaged setting.
Right. We never, ever, ever, ever saw him in an unstaged setting. And here's something else to think about. And Larry's involved with this because he's the one who did the work on that handwriting thing when Bruton and the Groden settled for this scribbled statement that, yeah, I'm the man in the plaid shirt. Bullshit. But the reason why Bruton may have realized that, hey, I don't want to take this guy to Washington is because those ears would have been flapping out and been caught by a camera.
Good point.
Yeah. Okay. Larry?
Yeah, I agree. You know,
Now, I'll tell you something else. It may even explain why he died mysteriously in 1979.
do we really know that he died? How do we know that he died?
Well, we know that he was reported dead of a first heart attack at the age of 41.
New identity, man. You know.
Yeah, but anyway, the fact that they were afraid that some researcher or some reporter was going to take a genuine picture of him and including those ears, that may have been another reason why they had to just disappear him one way or another. So anyway, I think very significant. This is the only image that we can have 1,000% confidence in.
That's right.
Good work, Rob.
Okay, let's go. All right, now we're going to get back to this thing about Ruby. And let me make a general statement here, and somebody keep me abreast of the time. But I just learned in the last few days that Ruby tried to avoid going to the Western Union station, that he said on the phone to Lynn, that Karen Carlin, Little Lynn, the stripper. He said, look, tomorrow's Monday. I'll give it to you in cash, the money. And she said, oh, no, I have to have it because my rent is due. And he tried to get out of going to the Western Union office. But think about it. If you owe rent, what are the chances that anyone's even going to be there on a Sunday to collect it? You can't tell me that waiting till Monday was really going to be an issue. So this was a pretext to get Ruby to the Western Union station, which was just down the block from that ramp. Now, all they needed from there was a way to get Ruby to go from the Western Union station to the ramp and then down the ramp to the garage. And I really think that the way they did it was with a drug, scopolamine. It was widely used by the Nazis in World War II. The CIA used it throughout the 1950s in their MK Ultra program. What scopolamine does is it shuts down the critical areas of your brain such that if you're given a suggestion, you do it like a zombie. That is, they call it the zombie drug.
Ralph, what are the methods of administration of that drug?
It's odorless, it's tasteless, you can put it in food, you can put it in drink, and in fact, it can even be administered like through the air just like a dust.
But Ralph, remember, you're arguing that Jack didn't actually shoot Lee. Are you saying he was nevertheless in the crowd there, so they had two Ruby lookalikes, Jack himself?
No, Jim, he wasn't there at the time of the spectacle. This all happened before, and I'm glad you brought that up because there's something else that I've learned in the last 24 hours that to me is riveting, and that is that Ruby gave a very detailed account of what happened when he went to the ramp. He said he went there, he saw the police car, he saw one person, Lieutenant Pierce, in the police car, and he was talking to another officer who was on foot on the driver's side of the car. So Ruby was approaching from the passenger side of the car. He sees and recognizes Pierce in the car, and then he sees that there's an officer that he's talking to, but he did not know the name of the officer. And then he said he just walked down the ramp to the garage, and there, all of a sudden, the police jumped on him. He didn't know what he did. He said to them, "What are you doing? I'm Jack Ruby. You know me." He didn't know why they were jumping him. And they told him afterwards that he shot Oswald, but he didn't know anything about it until they told him. And he learned the same way that they did. But here's what I found out just in the last 24 hours. Pierce wasn't alone when he went there at 11:15, just a minute before the spectacle. He had two other officers in the car. One was Officer Putnam, P-U-T-N-A-M, and he was sitting in the front seat on the passenger side. So he was between Ruby and Pierce. And there was another officer whose name was Maxie in the back seat. Now, my question is, how could Jack Ruby, if that was when he was there, see Pierce without seeing the officer who was sitting in the passenger seat who was blocking his view of Pierce? He would have had a hard time recognizing Pierce. That's the first thing. But he certainly would have said that, yes, there was Pierce and there was another officer who was riding shotgun who was sitting there in the front.
Now, Ralph, looking at this ear, I see what looks like a little mole toward the top. But
well, that's right. And we confirmed it by looking at other photos.
And can we tell that Bookout doesn't have that little mole?
He does not have it, and this guy doesn't have it either. But the reason I made this collage was to demonstrate that Ruby, who was on the right, was probably about 2 weeks out from his last haircut. You know that when between haircuts you develop this sort of scruffy, dirty-looking growth, and
on the back of your neck.
On the back of your neck, and he had quite a lot of it. And notice that it went all the way down to his collar and below. There was no clear spot. But this other guy who was book out, his neck was clean. He was razored clean. And I want you to know another thing that I've realized in the last few weeks, and I also said on the Alex Jones show, which is that I really believe he was wearing a toupee there. That he had Bookout had very closely cropped. He had an FBI haircut.
Bookout was wearing a toupee.
Yeah, he was wearing a toupee. He was wearing a toupee.
It was a disguise. So it was a disguise, you're saying?
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next image. We want to keep
a disguise, Ralph. Here, Larry just confirming your belief.
All right, now this is something that just came up also in the last 24 hours. It was a realization I made. It's supposed to be Ruby on the right, and I believe it is Ruby on the left. That is the first image of him in which it's really him. And this is the image in which they supposedly just brought him in from the garage. They handcuffed him. His hands are cuffed behind his back. And they're walking right by Oswald's body. Now, keep in mind that we don't know, really, if Oswald was lying on the floor there. They said he was, and maybe he was, but we never saw the body. And so how do we really know that Oswald was there? But they're walking by Oswald's body. The officer that's leading him is being distracted by it. He's looking down at Oswald, presumably. But Ruby is just looking down. He seems to be totally out of it. He seems to be dejected. He seems to be just almost
like a zombie.
A zombie-like. Okay, that's exactly right. But here's the other thing. Why is his shirt unbuttoned, and why isn't he wearing a jacket? If they just brought him in from the garage, they didn't disrobe him in the jail office. I have read through now 5 detective testimonies, and they all said the same thing, that they got him inside the garage, the jail office. Nobody explained why they didn't cuff him in the garage, but once they got him into the jail office, then they finally pushed him down to the ground and cuffed him. And then they stood him up, and they walked him to the elevator, and they took him up to the 5th floor jail. Nobody said anything about removing his jacket. One guy said that they patted him down just to make sure that he had no other weapons. But therefore, his jacket should have been on him. So why is it off? I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous that he should be without a jacket there. And what I attribute it to is that they prepped him for this. They had him up on the 5th floor. They wanted to make him look like he had been through a scuffle. And so they opened his shirt and they made him look very disheveled. But they forgot about the fact that he should have been wearing a jacket. The shooter was definitely wearing a jacket. So that was a big mistake. But the thing I discovered last night was this. This picture here was taken in minutes of this one. And this supposed Jack Ruby has got his hands cuffed in front of his body. You can see that his hands are definitely not going down around his back. He is either not cuffed at all. He could be just clasping his hands. He may not have. They may have cropped this picture because he was just clasping his hands. With no
that face has been modeled.
Yes,
no doubt about it. That's not a real face.
Well, they blackened out the eyes. They did things to the nose. They fractured the nose here.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Lengthened the ear.
Now, Ralph, you got about 8 minutes left, okay?
All right, let's go to the next image then. Yeah, let's keep going. All right, the other thing that we've come to realize, again, the last few weeks, and this is solid. Jack Ruby was never at the Dallas police station on the afternoon of February 22nd. They have footage of him in the hallway after Oswald was brought in. This is one of the images on the left, and it's very popular to show it. And the idea of the image is that Jack Ruby was obsessed with Oswald, and there he was on Friday afternoon. if you look at that guy on the left, you can see that he's much bolder than Ruby.
And Ralph, he was obsessed with Oswald because they were friends. He'd had him over to the Carousel Club. He'd introduced him to Beverly Oliver and many other people as his friend Lee Oswald from the CIA.
This guy on the left has a very hooked nose. The tip of the nose goes down.
He looks like the same person.
It's very much lower. Ruby's nose was not that way. And here's the other thing that has come up. We have a phone record that at the time that this picture was taken, Jack Ruby was at the Carousel Club talking to his sister Eileen in Chicago. The call lasted 8 minutes, and he got off the phone at 2:05. This picture was taken at 2 o'clock. So how could Ruby be at the Carousel Club talking to his sister at the same time he was at the Dallas Police Department? But in addition to that, we also have it on record that Ruby denied being there. He was asked specifically if he was at the police station on the afternoon of Friday, and this was during a polygraph test. He pleaded with Chief Justice Earl Warren to let him take a polygraph test, and Earl Warren agreed, mainly just to coddle him. I don't think he even suspected that Ruby was lying, but Ruby was so determined to prove that he was telling the truth. He said, please let me take a polygraph. So they let him, and we have the record of it. And one of the questions he was asked was whether he was there, and he said very decidedly no. So I think that this, just like we have phony love ladies who appeared at the book, outside the book depository and in the squad room, this is a phony Jack Ruby. And the one thing I do not know is when this was made, when it surfaced. It may not have been at the time. It may have been years later that they decided that they wanted to do this, to have a Jack Ruby at the Dallas police station on that afternoon.
You got a little over 5 minutes left.
All right, let's go to the next image. All right, this came up just today. This is me. I'm not praying. I'm not saying the Pledge of Allegiance. What I'm doing there is I am duplicating the Jackson photo in which Oswald, after being shot in the side, supposedly slapped his hand, his arm and his hand, to his chest. Now, I have never heard of an abdominal gunshot victim doing that, and I can't imagine that they would, to just do this. But supposedly, that's what Oswald did. So I did it, and I want you to see how my hand looks, because we're going to compare it to the hand in the Jackson photo, which is a monstrosity. All right, go to the next image. All right, so that on the left, on the right is the Jackson photo, and on the left, it's my hand. The first thing I want you to notice is how much longer his thumb is. His thumb is going all the way up his index finger. You can see on me that the thumb basically finishes its run long before the other fingers do.
The hand even looks arthritic.
It's worse than that, Jim. Basically, what you've got there on the right, well, first of all, do this for me. Look at my wrist. Notice that it's just a straight linear wrist. It's just a passage of bone that goes directly across, no ifs, ands, or buts. It looks the way a wrist should look. But look now at this wrist, and you can use the junction of the sleeve and the skin to look at the actual shape of it. So he's got this wrist that reaches this point here, and it looks, to me, it looks like a cape. If this was a geographical map, we would call that point a cape, like, the cape of good luck or something. And then it makes this half moon. That whole span is supposed to be one wrist. So
could the half moon because of something in front of it, like a piece of material from his...
What it is, Jim, is it's two hands. The half moon is a right hand, and the other part that looks normal is a left hand. So what he's really doing there is, and that's not Oswald doing it, but what they did to create that image was to just merge two hands, a right hand and a left hand. And then because they thought it was too big looking, they apparently got rid of one of the fingers because there's only 3 knuckles plus the thumb. So there's
That's a great catch, Ralph. You got about 2.5 minutes.
All right. So on me, you've got the thumb and then 1, 2, 3, 4. So I've got 5 fingers. On him, you've got this humongous thumb, which certainly wasn't Oswald's. And then there's the knuckle of the index finger, the knuckle, I guess, of the ring finger, the pinky. It looks like it's the middle finger that's missing, but there's definitely only 4 fingers there. So that is a freak hand. And there is no way that it was Oswald's hand. There's no way that it was anybody's hand. This is a piece of art that they slapped together afterwards because they wanted to create this effect. But there is no way that that is real. There is no way that that is anatomical. And therefore, there's no way that anyone can deny that that photo was altered.
This is your last image, right, Ralph?
Oh, is that it? Is there anything else?
No, I wanted to give Larry a chance and Don a chance and Gary a chance to get in on this.
All right, yeah, absolutely.
All right. Okay, what I'd like to do real quick, I took some time to find this. I hope I have. If not, oh, that's the wrong one. Hang on.
Well, I wanted Don to comment on what Ralph has presented, Gary.
Yeah, go ahead, Don.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, Ralph breaking down more photos again. Have you had has Larry had a chance to analyze these, do some image processing on them?
No, so this is all brand. This is cutting edge here.
This is great. This is great.
Yeah,
Ralph.
In the last 24 hours.
Larry, you want to comment?
Well, I did the book out, the one from the earlier slide that Ralph showed. You know, the guy with the front cuffed in the front. We did overlays on that, and it was night and day. You know, that's not Ruby, period.
Definitely not Ruby.
Okay, forget it. If the entire house of cards of Ruby shooting Oswald is built on that, then it's over, you know?
Excellent, Larry. Gary, would you like to comment?
Yeah,
would you like to comment?
I finally found it. I thought I lost it, but what I want to show you is something that's going to confirm what Dr. Cinque is trying to say. All right, so this comes up at 111 and 22, and you'll hear what Ruby was doing at the time they picked him up. So here it is.
An ambulance apparently had been standing by in case of emergency. It was rushed up, and Oswald put into it, taken to Parkland Hospital. Beam said, one man up there said that the suspect, Ruby, was mumbling and received it.
All right, so y'all got that?
Mumbling. He was mumbling, right?
Right, exactly. Now I have another one. Let me just line it up, and it's going to help you out. All right.
He was drugged. I'm telling you, he was drugged.
Okay, this is going to take just a few seconds to get to where it needs to go, and then you'll see what Jack Ruby's lawyer had to say.
One out of every 3 American presidents was either killed or shot. He did it or anything else. We were in there proving that he did it, which I think we have. President Kennedy, we are told, was shot in the White Temple. Is a people of great mindset, and they are not going to be stampeded or driven. Frankly, I think that's the memorial to the President of the United States should belong to all. That really the first thing that he remembered of the shooting itself was when he was in the homicide office.
Did y'all catch that? Did y'all catch that? He said the first thing that he remembered of the shooting is when he was in the homicide division. So,
Gary, we're over time. I think you did great to work these in.
Yes, absolutely. He was drugged. Absolutely. No doubt about it. Jack Ruby was drugged.
All right. Anybody else want to comment before we shut it down?
Great job, Ralph.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Great job.
Good night.
Ralph. And
Thank you.
And Charles as well.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes.
you for having me. Yeah,
Thank
great.
you.
Been the new JFK show number 160, and we'll see y'all next week. Larry's got some good stuff for us.